This episode is what happens when a child discovers that safety itself can become dangerous. Not strangers, not monsters, not war. Home, family, the living room, the people meant to protect you. And once the brain learns that lesson, it starts building a survival identity. Tonight's episode explores childhood trauma, nervous system conditioning, hypervigilance, authority and fear, survival psychology, addiction environments, how children adapt to chaos, why many adults never truly leave survival mode, and whether healing means teaching the body that the emergency is finally over. So let's begin. When I was 5 years old, my mom and my uncle took acid together, LSD. What started as yelling inside my grandmother's living room became one of the most traumatic moments that permanently changes the way a child understands reality. My mom threatened to call the cops. My uncle grabbed the rotary phone. I was hiding in the bedroom, dialed 911, then took the phone and beat my mom over the head with it. I can still remember the police lights reflecting off sighting outside my grandma's house. And what's strange is I had already seen traumatic things before this. And this moment felt different because this was the moment my brain realized something terrifying. The place I thought was safe wasn't actually safe. And once a child learns that lesson, the brain starts recalculating everything: how to behave, how to avoid conflict, how to read people, how to detect mood shift, how to survive emotionally, how to avoid becoming the next target. Psychologists call this hypervigilance. And I live in this every day. I I put on, the way I look because I never want anybody to think that about the places I come from, the things I've seen and the things that happened to me. And when I was coming up, the people that were raising me were always telling me, "You're a cool dude. You're cool. You're cool." So later in life, once I realized all the things that went on, I put it together. They raised me to be a cool dude. So that's why I look the way I do. Researchers who study childhood trauma say children raised in unstable homes often develop nervous systems that remain stuck in threat detection mode long after the danger has ended. The body begins scanning for danger automatically, not sometimes, constantly. And my mind does this every day. One major study on adverse childhood experiences found that children exposed to violence, addiction, instability, or abuse have dramatically higher risk of anxiety disorders, depression, substance abuse, incarceration, chronic illness, and suicidal thinking later in life. And according to trauma researchers, the young, excuse me, the younger the exposure happens, the more deeply those experiences shape the architecture of the brain. And I know this is true, certainly, because I looked back, I studied, I took notes, I have all this in a journal. I didn't know anything of this when I was 5. All I knew was that police became part of my life after that until I was 28 years old. And it took another decade after that to stop believing the police were always out to get me. Not logically, not biologically. That's what trauma does. It teaches the body lessons the conscious mind may not even understand. So, tonight, I want to talk to you about survival psychology, not from a textbook, but from me, from the inside. So, this is segment one. The child brain is built for survival. One of the most important psychological truths people understand is this: children are adaptation machines. A child trapped in instability cannot leave, cannot fight, cannot control the environment. They cannot say yes, they cannot say no. So the brain adapts instead. The nervous system begins studying tone of voice, footsteps, facial expressions, pacing, intoxication, silence, sudden movement, tension in the room. The child becomes a survival analyst. Research in developmental psychology shows that chronic childhood stress changes the amygdala, the brain's alarm system. Children raised around violence or unpredictability often develop enlarged fear responses and elevated cortisol levels. And that's what I've suffered from my whole life about everything. So now it's like everything's fearful and anything I could do could get me in trouble. There is a lot of wonderful police men and women in the world, and to have my brain think that people are out there constantly plotting to come and get me or that I'm doing something wrong. It's just a horrible life to live, and it's aged me, and it's not fun, and it's hard to get past. Now that I know and I can look back and I have studied the connections between all the different things that were going on back then and how I went on to become is interesting. These things destroy a person on the inside. It's a shame, honestly. So, segment two, the body keeps score long after the event ends. And I love that book, The Body Keeps a Score by Bessel van der Kolk. It's one of the books that just taught me everything about my lungs and breathing, your mind, and all the different parts of hormones that your brain can stress your body out so hard that it produces those hormones and you don't even know it. Trauma researchers repeatedly say the body remembers what the mind tries to move past. That explains why people can react intensely to situations that seem small from the outside. A loud voice, a police siren, a slammed door, someone walking aggressively, an argument, authority. The nervous system does not separate present reality from past survival patterns very well. It can't make the correlation. Its job is prediction. If something resembles danger from childhood, the body can react before conscious thought even catches up. Scientists studying PTSD and childhood trauma found that trauma survivors often show increased activity in the amygdala while areas associated with rational regulation become less active during stress, meaning the survival brain can overpower the thinking brain. And every day, 24/7, 365 days a year for 50 years. That's why people sometimes say, I know I'm overreacting, but I can't stop it. The body learned first, the mind tries to explain afterwards. And I do believe a lot of times the brain repeats simulations it saw other human beings doing when we were being incepted and learning. So if you're a boy seeing a man yell at your mom, things like that, a woman seeing her mom yell at her mom, whatever. It does things to people. So segment 3, addiction environments, psychological chaos. Children raised around addiction often develop what psychologists call unpredictable attachment environments. So after my dad died, my mom hit the bottle pretty much and never came back. She used to make me take the vacuum and put pantyhose on the end of it and, vacuum her drugs up out of the carpet and so she could get a fix. And it's interesting someone's thought process when they do those things to somebody who can't say no, can't say yes, has seen so many traumatic incidents of people doing things they shouldn't have been doing. In those moments, love becomes inconsistent, safety becomes conditional. The emotional climate changes constantly. One moment people are laughing, the next moment someone explodes. And psychedelics, alcohol, methamphetamines, opioids, cocaine, and other substances can amplify emotional unpredictability inside the family. And I want to teach you something too about these drugs. If you drink alcohol and you do cocaine, those two chemicals go into your liver and create a brand new drug called cocaethylene, which I got to see a lot of these people in my life that I loved go through so many unpredictable, chaotic moments when they didn't, because they didn't know how to control. They didn't realize how to separate their emotions from their logic or their thought process. Researchers constantly find that children exposed to addiction environments experience higher anxiety rates, increased hypervigilance, higher incarceration rates, elevated risk of addiction later in life, difficulty trusting relationships, emotional regulation problems, increased depression, and suicidality. And those are just some of the ones I could think of. The child learns one central lesson: stay prepared because the environment changes without warning, and you better be prepared. This is the fourth segment: when police become part of the nervous system. This part matters because many people do not realize how authority gets psychologically attached to fear. For some children, police symbolize rescue, they should. They're civil servants. For other children, police symbolize screaming, chaos, flashing lights, family collapse, arrests, humiliations, fear, violence escalating. And those were just some of the ones I could think of that I had gone through in my life. So the nervous system pairs authority with threat. Again, not because the belief is always rational later, but because trauma responses are built on survival prediction. The nervous system asks, have I survived this before? Not, is this statistically accurate? This distinction changes everything. Many trauma survivors unconsciously carry adversarial relationships with authority for decades. Not always because they are dangerous people, sometimes because their nervous system was conditioned through fear, exposure during childhood. Segment 5: survival mode becomes personality. One of the most haunting psychological realities is that survival mode adaptation eventually stop feeling temporary. They start feeling like identity. People say, that's just how I am. But sometimes the anger was armor, the isolation was protection, the distrust was survival, the humor was deflection, the emotional numbness was exhaustion, the hyper independence was fear of vulnerability. Many people are walking around with childhood survival systems still running in the background at 29, 39, 43, 49, 58, you know. And according to trauma experts, unresolved childhood trauma can affect relationship stability, physical health, sleep, addiction risk, emotional regulation, career consistency, self worth, immune function, lifespan itself. The ACE study found that people with high trauma exposure had significantly elevated risk for chronic disease, substance abuse, depression, and suicidal attempts. Trauma is not just emotional, it becomes biological. Segment 6: masculinity and emotional survival. A lot of boys raised in unstable homes are never taught emotional processing. They are taught endurance. Instead of saying, I'm scared, they become angry, detached, impulsive, numb, addicted, suspicious, emotionally unavailable, hyper-aggressive, isolated. Many men are not emotionalists. They are overloaded nervous systems pretending to be functional. And society often rewards survival adaptation in men until those adaptations finally collapse. The man who never trusts anyone, the man who stays emotionally distant, the man who always expects betrayal. I was him for a long time. The man who cannot relax, the man who feels safer alone. Remember, isolation is a cancer. Sometimes those are not personality traits. Sometimes those are survival strategies that never got turned off, friends. Segment 7: can the nervous system heal? Yes, it can. This may be the most important part of the episode because trauma psychology is not hopeless. Neuroscience now supports the idea of neuroplasticity, the brain's availability to rewire itself through repeated experience. Peace is healing. Peace is not boring. Healing often happens through safe relationships, emotional consistency, therapy, community, spirituality, purpose, physical regulation, reflection, honesty, routine, creative expression. And I think all of us need to get back to praying in our country every day. The nervous system slowly learns. Not every raised voice means danger. Not every authority figure means harm. Not every relationship ends violently. Not every room is unsafe. But healing can feel terrifying at first. I know it did for me. I would pace forever. I didn't know what to do. All the chaos had stopped. And I realized it finally because I had gotten silent and quiet. Survival mode becomes familiar, even when it hurts. For me, it took almost 10 years to stop believing the police automatically were out to get me. I think that's because trauma doesn't disappear with the event's end. It disappears slowly through repetition, kindness to yourself, the most passionate forgiveness. It's okay. It's all right. You didn't do that. And if you did do that, forgive yourself to the fullest depth of human existence because you have the power. You don't have to carry all those things around all the time. You are not your emotions. You are a wonderful human being that has something to offer the world. Not alone, not on your own. Going it alone only makes the journey that worse. We're all in this together because we're all a part of this. It disappears slowly through repetition, through safety, through new experiences, through learning that the present is not the past. So here's something to think about and reflect on. What did your childhood teach your nervous system about safety? How are you using those tools today? How are you using those tools against you? Are your reactions based on your present life or your past environment? Your environment can be changed, your past cannot. You can forgive your past and all the people in it and move forward with greatness. What behaviors became survival adaptations for you? Write this down in your journal. What are you doing right now, everywhere you go, just to adapt to another human being standing before you with some weird look on their face, some odd body language? What parts of yourself are built for survival instead of peace? How are you celebrating your life? How are you being kind every day when you wake up and you put those feet on the floor to yourself? How are you building yourself up to become a better you tomorrow? What would your life look like if your nervous system stopped expecting war? What would it be like to finally lay in the grass in your own home, in your own yard, and not worry that at any moment the police could pull in the drive? Some people grow up learning the world is safe. Others grow up learning the world changes without warning. And if you were raised around violence, addiction, instability, police intervention, emotional chaos, screaming, fear, or unpredictability, your nervous system may still be carrying those experiences right now. Not because you are weak, not because you are broken, because your brain adapted. That's what human beings do. We survive, we thrive, we grow, we learn, we move on. And people grow up, people change, people learn, and people move on. But survival is not the same thing as peace, y'all. And maybe the hardest thing a person can ever do, honestly, is teach your body that the war is finally over. When I was 38, I was looking out my kitchen window and it dawned on me I had the thought. every day of my life that the police were coming. And it's funny because I took 2 years of law enforcement in high school, an LAVC class. I got picked to do 6 weeks state police training my junior year. And, well, you know, unfortunately, my brain didn't make it, even though I would have been one of the greatest cops they ever seen. I wanted to change my family stars, and that was my whole purpose there. I wanted to help my family become better. And I thought that going that route, and maybe that's why I was so traumatized, and that I didn't make it, and that I wound up getting in trouble a lot later and getting arrested myself, doing all kinds of things that I never dreamed I would have done. But that's what addiction does. That's what not having any values, morals, or ethics to choose right and wrong, to realize you're a human. You have a say here. And I want to say thank you to Officer Morgan. He came into my life that night when my uncle hit my mom in the head with the phone, and my mom had this huge lump on her forehead. And I kicked my uncle in the leg that night. I was 5, and I wanted my dad so bad, but um, Mr. Morgan interjected himself into my life throughout the 80s, and I thought he was a monster in the 90s when I was a teen, and I always thought he was out to get me. Well, he had a stepdaughter that was my same age, and I've put it together now that I'm reflecting and looking back. His uh his daughter was awesome. She was kind, she was fun. She was a wonderful human being. And when I started drinking, Mr. Morgan, he sent me a message on Facebook warning me, you got a warrant. Look out. And I told him, I said, it was for not paying a bank payment. It was $500, and I was on the run for 2 weeks until I got paid. And I thought he was out to get me. He never arrested me. He had my back. He knew me ever since I was a little kid, knew I didn't deserve that crap. So, his daughter was in my class. We went to high school together, and I go away. Then I move to a different state and get my life together, and I decide that, I want to be a refrigeration technician. I went to school and I did all that, and I became successful overnight. It was insane. But I wound up coming back home, and I went to church, and my intuition came upon me so hard. I had seen his daughter since high school. When I seen her at church that day, something came over me and told me it was the last time I was ever going to see her. And when the church was in worship, I jumped up because I looked back and I saw her, but I seen a dark shadow standing next to her. I ran out of the church and I caught her at the door and I gave her a hug and I said, "Hey, it was so good to see you. I mean that, and you take care of yourself." Maybe a year later, she died of an overdose. She was fighting the needle for a long time, I guess, and I just didn't know, but my spirit did. My spirit never forgets them people, or those movements, or those feelings I get when I know something ain't right. And I know at times something ain't right. I don't mean to get emotional on you, but I want to thank that officer because he wasn't out to get me. He called me in third grade. I'd moved 40 miles away. Said, "I had a report you were shooting kids with a slingshot today downtown." And I was so hurt. And I told him, "Sir, I was in school all day. I live, 30, 40 miles away from there now. I haven't lived there in a year." In reality, it was another kid with the same name as me, and he got me in trouble and got me my reputation a lot in my life, doing a lot of wicked things to people. But I've always had a good heart, and I've never been out to hurt nobody. And nobody's out to hurt me. And if they are, so be it. It's the way life goes. And you just got to be kind and forgive people as much as you can. And just try to know that we're safe. It doesn't do any good be it thinking that you're unsafe constantly. All it does is drag you down. It degrades you. And that's what I did to myself. I Once I got in trouble and was arrested multiple times. One time I was arrested every single month for a whole year. That's how bad I was drinking. And I didn't know what was wrong with me. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't have nobody that would help me. I had a big family. Nobody gave a crap. And I'm not a victim. It was just circumstance. I get it. But I got to live with all those tragedies of not getting to live a fulfilled life or being ever safe. You know, my brain is the one that was never safe. And it wasn't fair to little me. And the things that happened to my audience members, it wasn't fair and it wasn't right. And most of you tune in because you're going through similar situations like this that I went through. And these are things I have to think about as an adult man now that's striving to be a leader and be better and to have people place labels on other people and think that society is formed to be a society of justice. It's improper because there's too many mental illnesses out there to be placing labels on anybody because all labels do is a way to divide people and to separate them from a crowd. And that's why I have said in past podcasts or excuse me, episodes, it's better to stand outside the crowd and watch them. And I'm safe in saying that now because I have been through so many injustices. I mean, look at the internet today, doxing people with their political jargon out there. And I do the same stuff too. I get sucked in. I get it. But, you know, we all have to respect authority. We all have someone we have to answer to, whether it be God, whether it be your spouse, whether it be a teacher, a police officer, and these people, these are occupations. There's been so many different statistical reports on how police behave and the things that go on with them. And, police officers have the highest alcohol rates, highest suicidal rates, highest spousal abuse rates. And it's alarming everywhere because that is a huge position. You're a mind that wanted to get into criminal justice. And then once you get in there and you see all the tragedies that they didn't train you for at the academy or in school, you start to shift gears. You start to become different. You start to understand people like, whoa, they're just like me. I'm just like them. I'm going through all this and I see all that. Well, it affects a human being a certain type of way. And we got to stop this rhetoric that defund the police and all that stuff, too. That's never happening here. We have a police force for a reason. They have a job to do. They're not coming to get us. And I know that, too. And it was tragic to have to think that stuff for so long. And now, being an adult man, well on my way to success, I've already been successful. But I just know that there's a purpose out there for me that is greater than anything I ever thought of. And the same goes for each and every one of you listening right now. Be kind to yourself, be compassionate, learn to forgive to the depths of your soul. Other people's opinions of us do not matter completely. And when they post things and they do things and they threaten, let them. Good for them. Because it don't affect you. Anywhere you go, anything you do, like Viktor Frankl said, you can take everything from me, but you can never take the light inside of my heart. Not one time. Till next time.